Welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels for this new edition of Talking Europe. The EU's so-called banking union was supposed to be up and running this year, but differences between Brussels, the European Central Bank and Germany over the way forward for the new banking authority have slowed progress to a crawl. Why does Europe badly need a banking union? I'll put this question to my guests in a moment. And in the second part of the program, I'll be joined by Kristalina Georgieva. She's the EU Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid, a native of Bulgaria. She will comment on the wave of pro-EU protests in Ukraine. Pablo Zalba, welcome to Talking Europe. You're a Spanish MEP. You're also the Vice Chair of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. Now at home, you belong to the Partido Popular of Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy. Also on this set from Luxembourg, Frank Engel. Welcome to Talking Europe. You're also from the European People's Party. That's the centre-right group here in the EP Parliament. Your country is one of the world's largest financial centres and therefore whatever happens in terms of banking union matters to Luxembourg. Now, of course, the need for a banking union became apparent in the wake of the financial crisis because the collapse of a number of European banks forced their home countries to seek EU bailout and led to credit crunch. Pablo Zalba, what is a banking union?
Well, a banking union has three pillars. First of all, a single supervisor mechanism. This means that the European Bank, instead of being supervised by the national supervisors, in the case of Spain, for example, the Bank of Spain, are gonna be, from November next year, supervised by the European Central Bank. The second pillar of banking union is the single resolution mechanism. That is an authority and a fund to resolve banks that cannot survive. And finally, the third pillar of the banking union is the single deposit scheme, the same one from the European Union. The single supervision mechanism has been approved both in the Council and the European Parliament. We are now working on the second pillar, on the single resolution mechanism, and somehow there's an agreement to get it ready before the end of this term. And for the next term we'll raise the debate on the third pillar.
Now, as we understand, the aim, of course, is to have a more unified set of rules and protections for Eurozone banks. Is it really necessary to have a banking union at this stage of the crisis?
Well, be it at this stage of the crisis or be it at some other stage, I believe that it's logical, that it's necessary to give an economic sector that is in need of regulation, that is regulated, that is also contained by a number of structures, and which operates across national borders and has been doing that for quite a long time, also trans-border structures in order to contain and to regulate it. We haven't gone far enough in that yet. It's always appeared strange to me that, talking about Luxembourg, we have over 150 banks. Of those 150 banks that we have, there is 3 or 4 that are Luxembourgish establishments. The rest are dependencies of banks that are not Luxembourgish, but that operate there. I have never understood why the different parts of the same bank would be submitted to totally different rules and structures depending on the country that they operate in within the same currency area. And therefore, the banking union makes perfect sense.
What a lot of our viewers want to know is, had we had a banking union 4 years ago, would we have avoided most problems within the Eurozone?
I don't know whether most or not, but probably we will have not coped with many of the problems we face. We created a monetary union, but we didn't create the economic union that usually follows a monetary union. This somehow creates a lack of governance in many governments, in many member states, who created many imbalances, too many imbalances, to which somehow had even questioned the euro as a currency.
As Pablo explained, it would mean a great transfer of sovereignty towards, I guess, the European Central Bank, and some countries are dragging their feet. I'm thinking of Germany. The German government doesn't want to see the European Central Bank having too much of a role to play in this. There's a problem there.
And it's sort of funny because the European Central Bank is already modeled on the German Bundesbank. So one would expect the Germans to trust the spitting image of what they have at home, but still they don't, which in my humble view has to do a lot with the fact that the Germans always believe that they can do better than most. They will eventually have to come around to the fact that it can only logically be the European Central Bank that does this. I wouldn't see who else. And unless we give this authority to one European central structure, which can only be the ECB, we don't have a banking union. So it's either the full package or it's not much.
Is there a problem with Germany?
I don't think whether it's a problem of Germany or not. I think that obviously there have been a little bit reluctant with some specific issues, but I firmly believe that Germany at the end was sure that a banking union was needed. That was overall agreed by everyone. So, I mean, I think Germany is very keen on doing everything very well, and I understand that banking union is something you cannot set up in a few months. I think we are not aware, we have not enough perspective to be aware of the big steps we are giving with the banking union. So I understand that Germany somehow is reluctant and wants everything is very clear before any further step.
One of the main goals of having a banking union, of course, is to restore credit lending, particularly in Europe's financially crippled south. Will it work?
I do hope so, but it will not work on its own. And it will certainly not work until we finally get to a situation and to a solution where also the European Central Bank can assume the role that every central bank which is worthy of the name assumes, and that is the lender of last resort. Because no banking union is going to take that responsibility away from a place which today we don't have. And therefore, if I look at money in circulation in the south, I have the nagging feeling that the banking union itself is not going to solve our problem.
Yet another sign that the crisis is not completely over in the Eurozone. The Netherlands has become the latest member to be stripped of its AAA rating by Standard & Poor's. William Hildebrand reports.
And then there were three. When ratings agency Standard & Poor's downgraded the Netherlands one notch below AAA, it left just 3 out of 17 Eurozone countries, Finland, Germany and Luxembourg, with the gold standard rating from all 3 leading credit agencies. S&P said the Netherlands had disappointing growth prospects and was not performing as well as its peers, though the Dutch finance minister said upcoming reforms targeting the housing market, pension system and labor market will prevent any further downgrade.
We're pushing forward a number of reforms to deal with some of the structural issues in our economy. Even though we're moving out of the crisis, we will have economic growth next year. It's still much too low. We have to get higher figures in order to become a AAA country again, which is, of course, our ambition.
It's a familiar sentiment around the EU. Hope the recovery has begun and that the crisis is in the rearview mirror, but recent data has only shown slight improvements. Unemployment in the Eurozone dipped for the first time since 2011. October's rate of 12.1%, though, was only a small drop. So while some EU officials are positive about the future, the bloc's economy grew just 0.1% in the third quarter, and ratings agencies warned more downgrades could be on the way.
Frank Engel, Standard & Poor's cited weakening growth prospects for its decision to downgrade the Netherlands. The crisis is not over.
Of course the crisis isn't over. I wonder who can pretend that it is.
Well, some do, as you know.
Some
do,
EU
leaders.
Yeah, well, this is then what makes the term of leader so disreputable. But at the same time, I find it perfectly ridiculous, among many other things regarding credit rating agencies, that insufficient growth prospects would justify a credit rating being taken away. Supposing that the Netherlands has sustainable debt, which is the only thing that counts, what the hell does a growth prospect really change in whether or not you assume that they can pay back? But the point is that these rating agencies have to continue justifying themselves, which they in fact pain to do, because nobody really believes that we need them any longer, and I would violently plead in favor of finally getting rid of them.
clearly in your country the crisis is not over, but what's the feeling in Madrid and across Spain?
Well, the feeling in Madrid is first, we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we have to insist to go on working both at national level and European level. National level, to go on working on reforms. I think we are seeing some positive signals. For example, the unemployment drop in November for the first time since 1989. This is really a positive signal, but I insist, we have to go on working on reforms, we have to go on working with fiscal consolidation, and at the European level, we have to go on working at further integration, economic and political integration. We have to go on working in the banking union, and I insist, what I said before, we have to look for solutions to credit, to flow, for SMEs and families, especially in southern countries. Without credit, it will be impossible to consolidate the recovery. And I think, and I go back to the beginning, we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to consolidate these positive signals.
And a key EU summit will be held at the end of the month. We'll be following it to see whether decisions will or won't be made here in Brussels. But it's time now to welcome our new partner in the programme. Joining us is Tim King from European Voice, publisher of a weekly newspaper on EU news. Tim, welcome to Talking Europe. European Voice provides independent insight into the Brussels Beltway. And starting this week, you'll be joining us to comment on what's been happening in Brussels, looking at the week in Brussels, and it was a good week for two politicians, I believe.
Yes, on a mixed verdict. We've been trying all week to work out what to make of the aftermath of the Eastern Partnership Summit and the European Union's relations with Ukraine. This time last week we were looking at an Eastern Partnership Summit that had ended in failure, where a week ago the Ukrainian police were dragging demonstrators out of the square. And as this week went on, we saw demonstrations in favour of the European Union, and on balance what we decided was that all this was a good thing for Carl Bildt, the Foreign Minister of Sweden, and Radek Sikorski, the Foreign Minister of Poland. And those two really have been the leaders in trying to promote the issue of relations with Europe's eastern neighbourhood up the European Union's agenda.
More than Germany or France, for instance. It was really Sweden, Poland and Lithuania who were pushing for this deal with Ukraine.
It's been partly personal, and it's partly down to what countries they are. I mean, the importance of Ukraine to Poland is different from France's situation. But also, they put a lot of the legwork in before the summit, but they've also maintained the contacts, and that's a very important issue. Another interesting aspect, of course, is that we have to consider that Sikorski probably wants to become the next EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy. Replacing Catherine Ashton at the end of next year, and becoming a member of the European Commission.
Trying to position himself, clearly.
And like all ambitious politicians, he's trying to position himself, and he's made some success in the last couple of weeks.
Right. Then it was a bad week for a number of countries, and for a particular reason.
It was a bad week for those countries that didn't score so well in the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD's tables on school performance for 15-year-olds.
The PISA ranking, right?
The PISA rankings, performance of international student assessment, or something like that.
So who isn't doing well?
Well, amongst the European Union people, the ones bumping along at the bottom of the class, probably at the back of the class, are Bulgaria, Cyprus and Romania. Slightly different because it's assessed for mathematics, for science and for reading skills. But basically those three are not doing well.
Do we know the reason why they're doing so badly?
Some of it is down to money and investment, but it's not all down to that. And one of the striking things, for instance, is Sweden, a country not the poorest in the European Union by any means, is actually their performance is below the OECD average. Luxembourg as well, below the OECD average.
Why is that?
Look, if I were to be unnice to my countrymen, especially those in the sector, then I would say just having the most expensive education system on earth doesn't make it the best. It is one of the most expensive, Statistics prove that. But at the same time, we're lacking quite a number of things that many bring down to the texture of the society, which is pretty multilingual. You know that we have 45% of immigration in the population, which doesn't make things any easier.
Getting lost in translation when it comes to reading.
The education system by necessity has to be multilingual. But on the other hand, the Finnish system is as well.
Yeah.
Not so much on the grounds of immigrants, but because they have a second official language, and Finland scores brilliantly.
What about Spain? I know that Spain has invested a lot in education,
well,
despite the
not
budget
performing
cuts.
as well as it should be, and it's the same example, in my opinion, like like Luxembourg, that the more you invest doesn't mean the better results you obtain. So I think you have, or we have in Europe, to try to balance budgetary policy in education, but making sure that this investment, not cost, investment, give the results obtained.
And the quality, of course. One last thing, Tim, what's your leading story today or this week, I should say, in European Voice?
Well, we're looking ahead to the European Council. And of course, one element in the European Council will be the banking union. But I don't want to bring you back to the beginning of your programme and get you all round again.
Banking union. So we'll leave it there on the banking union. Thank you very much to all of you for taking part in this edition of Talking Europe. Please stay with me. I'll return just after the news break. I'll bring you an interview with Kristalina Georgieva. She's from Bulgaria and she's the EU Commissioner in charge of humanitarian aid.